Hi, it's me again. I'm back. February 5th, 2022, Saturday morning, 11:30 a.m. here on the West Coast of the United States. I'm back. I'm here. Let's do this. I was going through some records the other day, came across one of my favorite albums of all time, pulled out some of the singles from that album, and now you know what's up. Approximately 20 to 30 minutes of rambling from me. I've got a new camera and a slightly new setup. It has some effects to it. I've been tinkering around with them and I'm going to use them sparingly. You can tell me what you think about it. Basically, I can put backgrounds and little things in the background. So I'm going to flash the art of some of these records in the back. It's going to look cheesy and corny and dopey, but I figure it's better than looking at the reality of my computer room here. Where I don't have any records or anything interesting to look at. My records are in another room and scattered all over the place, but they're not where my computer is. So, that's the way it is. I've thought about doing it where in my record room, but just it's tight in there and the lighting's bad and it's just bad. So the light's good and the light's better in here. And I'm going to continue doing it in here. But at any rate, I'm going to flash the covers of the albums I'm going to talk about, in addition to holding up the records. And I also wanted to point out too that I feel a little funny about holding records up. I know people have said, I've gotten opinions from both sides. Like, it doesn't matter if you hold the records up. And then I have some people who are like, yes, hold the records up. I'm torn on that because to me, it's about the music. I'd rather talk about the music. You hear me rant all the time on this channel about my anti-consumerism views, and I feel very strongly about that. And I feel like holding up records is, I'm kind of buying into that, like showing products. And a lot of times I show records that are really rare and hard to find and expensive, and I feel a little torn on that. So I'm still going to show records. I'm just not going to show as many, because I do think it's about the music. I don't, whether it's on vinyl or digital or whatever, I think that's what's key. It's about the music. Holding up records that are out of print, they're going to cost you $100 or $200 to buy. I just don't know if that's the best thing to do. And I don't know that I want to promote doing that. I think there's enough of that kind of shit on YouTube. Product placement, transfers of money, showing off expensive things that nobody can buy or afford or want to afford. So I'm going to try to wean away from that a little bit. I will still show records, just not as many. I just don't think it practices what I want to be talking about, which is the music. That's what's important. And if I don't have a record in my collection and I want to talk about it, I'll state that. And I will still show them, but yeah, I don't know that it's the best way to talk about music, showing products while you're doing it. It just kind of reeks of like, hey, look what I've got and look what you'll never have. I hate that. I don't want to propagate that. So I'm going to try to shy away from that a little bit. And no rant really for me today. I'm thinking about things, and there's always something on my mind that I want to talk about. Typical YouTube stuff. I've already ranted about it before. I'm not going to go into it at length, but every time I get on here to do a video and talk about music, I see something on YouTube that drives me nuts. It's usually concerning somebody who just wants to show themselves handing money over to people or showing off records that they don't have any knowledge about. You guys know that drives me nuts. And those of you who have given your opinions about that on my channel, I really appreciate that. If some of you disagree with me, let me know that too. I like people who disagree with me. I don't need everyone to agree with everything I say. So I like the debate. But yeah, it's there's nothing new. It's just this celebration of the transfer of cash that drives me up the wall. And yeah, I assume people understand where I'm coming from there. It's like me not wanting to show the records. To me, it's just, you're celebrating products. You know, like with a record, you're literally just showing the cover and look what I've got. It's almost like this possession porn, like look what I've got. And it's the same with money. It's almost like people are, you know, so busy jerking themselves off to the fact that they had money and they got the money to spend it and they found something worth buying and then showing it off on the internet. And yeah, it's, you know, it's just bizarre to me. It's almost like people, yeah, it's like money porn. It's like monetary porn. You know, people taking $1 bills and wrapping around their cocks and jerking off to it. I don't understand it. And I know that's a step I shouldn't have taken. I shouldn't have just said that. And now that I've lost all of my viewers, I'm gonna trudge forth. Yeah, you know, what can I say? I'm offensive sometimes, but that's where my mind goes. It's just this weird, yeah, it's money porn. I'm not interested in propagating this idea. So keep your $1 bills to yourself, okay? And I dare you to not think of that image next time you fondle yourself. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? I think that's a good segue into Renegade Soundwave, actually, because they had music about porn and sex. This band was all about porn and sex. They were unapologetic about it. They were inspired by it. They had tracks named after it. So yeah, that's actually that's a decent lead in. Those of you who know Renegade Soundwave know that they were very inspired by sex, sex and crime, and you know, that's a lot of it, really. Now that I think about it, Renegade Soundwave were very much inspired by sex and crime. A lot of their tracks were based on that. So let's get into it, shall we? Renegade Soundwave, man, where do I start? Renegade Soundwave started from the ethers of bands like Mass and Rima Rima and Wolfgang Press. You know, they all had the same members, right? So going back to Mass and Rima Rima, the members of Renegade Soundwave were Gary Asquith. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Gary's a super cool guy. I've chatted with him over the years and exchanged emails with him. He's a really nice, real, cool guy. Man of the people. He likes discussing music with just random people who can prove that they're Renegade Soundwave fans, and he's still going. He's still out there. He was the singer and the lyricist, and then Danny Briate, he was the music maestro, and then Carl Bonney also was in Renegade Soundwave. He ended up leaving the band after the first album, but these guys all came from bands like Wolfgang Press in the early mid 80s, and Mass, which was a gothic thing, and Rima Rima, which was kind of a gothic thing. Those bands all released records on 4AD. And so they all started in that post-punk cloud in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. They all emerged from that punk cloud and started doing their post-punkness. And you know, anything you can find from Mass and Rima Rima, which isn't a lot, they didn't have a strong output, but I would recommend picking up anything you can find, because it definitely is some weird next level stuff, a sound that is, you know, it is, if you had to put a term to it, you know, you'd say it's goth, but it's a lot more than that too. It's just experimental and strange and unique and original. And that is the foundation of any great piece of music and art, in my opinion. It's just original and sounds very singular in its approach. So Mass, which consisted of Asquith, was Briate in that? Danny Briate in that? I don't know. Somebody can point this out. I think he was. And then Michael Allen from Wolfgang Press, which is another band I plan on talking about. I love the Wolfgang Press, specifically 2 albums, which I will definitely make videos on at some point. And yeah, I think Gary Asquith and Danny Briate, they after Mass broke up and after Rima Rima broke up, they had their hands in some different pies and some different music. But in the mid 80s, they started Renegade Soundwave. And Renegade Soundwave, those of you who were paying attention, and even those who are new to this, back in the 90s, there in the early 90s, there was this uh, origin of big beat, which is a horrible genre term, but it was, you know, I think when most people think of big beat, they think of Fatboy Slim and the Chemical Brothers, which is fair. I mean, those are the bands that championed that sound. But it was Renegade Soundwave that inadvertently started that whole movement. And when they were doing it, it wasn't coined big beat. It was electronic. I don't know. I guess it was electronic pop, but it was housed in techno and house music and even hip hop. It was just big beat, in my opinion, was just a mishmash of all those things. Hip hop, techno, rave. It was all everything mixed together in a big stew. And Renegade Soundwave were the first people to come up with this sound. In my opinion, and I think I'm right, Renegade Soundwave started big beat. They were the first big beat band, period. I think even the Chemical Brothers and, you know, Fatboy Slim would admit to this. Let's talk about their first record. This came out, this is Cray Twins on Mute Records. And this came out in 1987, I think. Let me look at this. Yeah, 1987 this came out. Okay, 35 years ago. Cray Twins is about exactly that, the Cray Twins. You see them fighting here in front of the Renegade speaker. This was like a kind of a theme, a motif for Renegade Soundwave, bass and drums, and they took that whole reggae aesthetic and gave it a certain spin. But Cray Twins came out, and this rocked people's minds back then. I was just a kid when this came out, but I do remember it being talked about in the British press. And the British press really loved this stuff. It was completely original and new. No one had heard anything like this. And it was just big, loud, bass heavy beats with Gary Asquith, you know, cracking jokes over it and singing about the Cray Twins. And by the way, he's really funny. He's a very funny man, a very funny lyricist, very droll. Everything he has to say was in tongue in cheek, but it was also serious. Like, they took themselves seriously, but they had a great sense of humor. And this was a great first single. This was the start of it. Big beats, big bass, big drums, big vocals, several mixes, as you can see. Really, really cool stuff. And very original. I always talk about this in my videos, but you know, it's easy to listen to this stuff now and think, wow, that sounds dated. But you have to put yourself back in this time, 1987, when nothing sounded like this. So for those of us who were there and heard it then, we can still listen to it now and think, wow, how far ahead of its time was this? And this is really ahead of its time. Cray Twins. This is where this band started. They took what they had gleaned from Rima Rima and Mass and Wolfgang Press, and they went nuts with this. The next evolution of sound. Bam, here it is. Renegade Soundwave. Again, the first of a long line of big beat releases. It's a terrible genre term. Most things that were big beat were crap, but this stuff's legit. This was the next single, Cocaine Sex. Still to this day, I think the greatest thing they ever did. This song is amazing. And again, just like the Cray Twins, there's no there's no imagery, there's no metaphors. This is about cocaine sex, having sex on cocaine. That's what it's about. There's nothing to dig deep into. There's no hidden meaning. That's what this is about. Getting high on cocaine and fucking your brains out. Now, this came out, I think, in the same year, 1987. Yeah, this came out the same year. Killer bass groove. One of the best bass lines you will ever hear in a song is on this. Awesome cover. Look at this. This is Gary. This is, I think that's Carl Bonnie, right? Is that Carl Bonnie? And then that's Danny Brite. Really cool cover. There's the back. On Mute. Really funny song, but killer. Like, I used to play this in the clubs when I was DJing in the early 90s, and it would just tear the shit out of a speaker, out of a bass bin. I mean, it's got a serious groove on this. If you can't dance to this song, there's something wrong with you. This was their second single, Cocaine Sex. Amazing stuff. This, I'm not going to show every Renegade Soundwave song or every Renegade record I have. I'm going to try to, like I said earlier, I'm going to try to shy away from just showing records, especially if they have boring generic sleeves. I'm just not going to do it. It's boring. Nobody wants to look at a generic sleeve. I'll just talk about the music. But I do have this in my hand right here, and I'm going to flash it because I think it's worth it. This is the Phantom. It's in there with Ozone Breakdown on the back. Let me show the label if you can see it. This is an amazing song. This came out, I think, in 1989. I want to say 1989. I think 1989. This is a very early example of great UK techno. What they did on the previous two singles I just talked about was more downbeat. It was a lower BPM vocals, more of a pop sensibility. These two songs are just straight up techno, instrumental techno, amazing stuff. In fact, this probably would be my favorite Renegade single. Very boring cover, I know. You want to get this, though. It has the full versions of Ozone Breakdown and the Phantom. It's in there. There are a number of releases of this, and they all have edited versions, but these have the full versions. And I think this is a French promo. For some reason, you can only get this in France, the full versions. You can buy these tracks, but they're edited. So you want to get those full versions. Anyway, a single that you must have. Now, here's where I'm gonna experiment a little bit. But hang with me here. I'm not going to keep this up for very long. This is one of the few toys I get to play around with now with my new setup. I can put backgrounds. Okay. This is the cover for their album, their first album that came out in 1989, Soundclash. Now, here's where the problem comes in. When I show the record, yeah, my camera's like, what? What's going on? Anyway, I might leave that up for a minute here. Let me get it out of here, though, so I can show the record. Thanks for hanging with me on this. I know this is super exciting stuff for you. Anyway, here's the album, Renegade Soundwave Soundclash. This came out in 1989, and this was a bomb, okay? This was a great record. It still is. Any song on here could easily be remixed. Super simple release. Here's the inner sleeve. You know, you just have some negatives of the band. There's Gary, looking all moody. This is from the Biting My Nails video, these still shots. Anyway, amazing record. Again, any song on here could be a single. Blue Eyed Boy actually is an amazing song, probably the best song on here. That would have been a nice single. Didn't get around to it, I guess. Lucky Luke on TV. Here's Pocket Porn, as I was discussing before. It is what it is. Again, no metaphoric, nothing, no allegory. It's about porn, okay? Gary is very passionate about sex and porn, and like we all are. We're humans, right? Traitor, probably robbery, about a robbery, really funny video. Space Gladiator, murder music, maybe with the exception of Blue Eyed Boy, the best song on here. The best songs on here are the non-singles, really. Biting My Nails is another single. I'll get to that in a minute. Couple of cover versions, you know. Biting My Nails is a cover version, actually. Can't Get Used to Losing You is also a cover version. Anyway, this album is amazing. Came out on Mute Records. It is a collection of 10 tracks that all have vocals, are all kind of down tempo. You don't hear a lot of straight up techno house like you did on Ozone Breakdown and the Phantom. It's in there. You just hear a lot of 3-4 minute pop tunes mixed with hip hop and house grooves, really. There's not a lot of, I mean, there's some techno influence on here, but it's mainly kind of house and down tempo hip hop stuff. And it's amazing. Seek this out, buy it, cherish it, listen to this. Again, this came out over 30 years ago. It has not aged a single second. A phenomenal record and a prototype for a lot of techno records that came after it. I would be willing to bet that most techno artists would cite this as a major influence. This was a big record at the time. Nothing sounded like it. And when you listen to it today, it is, in my view, it's hard to believe that it's that old. It hasn't aged at all. Some visionary artists making some visionary music that still works today. Seek this out. You have to get the record, all right? This is probably not easy to find now. I don't know that it's been repressed. Again, I feel torn about showing records that are way out of print, but find this, download it, go find it, just listen to it, have an experience with it, because it's worth it. It's worth every penny. Now, this is just one of the versions of Biting My Nails. This came out, this was released in all kinds of different ways with different covers. I'm showing this one because I like this cover. It's probably my favorite. And this is actually a re-release. This came out like a year after the initial release. It has some new mixes, like version 90 is a different mix. You get the original version. Anyway, cool cover. I love this cover. They always had this kind of metallic theme, if you've noticed. Lots of silver, lots of metal, lots of clanging, lots of coldness, lots of evilness. But when you listen to the records and the music, it's nothing but fun. They had a lot of fun with their stuff, you can tell. This is the US version of Probably a Robbery. The UK version's got the same cover, but this US one's better because it's got 6 tracks on it. Remixes of Space Gladiator, which came out as its own single in the UK. I'm not going to show that. It's got a white cover and a robot on the cover, but this shot here is from the Probably a Robbery video, which is basically, you know, there's Carl Bonny with a gun, and the video is basically them making a robbery and then getting arrested. And the lyrics are hilarious. Like, again, Gary is a really funny guy. It's just in his bones. He's funny, very creative, funny, cool dude. Anyway, a number of remixes, all are sweet, awesome nuggets of techno, house, electro, hip hop influence genius. US edition, get that one. And I can't imagine it's hard to find. Maybe it is, I don't know. What is this? Oh, okay. This is another Probably a Rob. This is the promo. Oh, actually, this has the turntable scratch mix, which is not on the one I just showed. That's a UK only release. This is the Mute logo, by the way. Their promos look like this back then. The turntable scratch mix is the best mix of this track. That's why I own that. Here's the original US release of Biting My Nails. It came out on Enigma. They were mainly like a punk label. Those of you who remember Enigma, they put out a lot of punk stuff, but they, you know, every once in a while they put out something like this. Biting My Nails. This US promo has some exclusive remixes that didn't come out elsewhere, I think. And here is something they did as a companion piece to the album. This is the In Dub album. And just to be cheeseball, I'm going to show this. I made an image of this too. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? You can't even see the record. There we go. You can kind of see it. And my camera is so crazy right now. It has no idea what to do. Anyway, this is in dub. Well, you can see it behind me, but let me turn this off. Yeah, I won't be doing that again. That's just, unless well, maybe I will if I don't show anything. There we go. This is like they did with their second album, How You Doing? They would put out an album, and then after that they would put out a dub and accompaniment. And basically, I've explained what dub is before. I assume most people know what that is, but dub basically kind of means it's the foundation is from the reggae world. In reggae, there was a vocal version and then an instrumental version that was more focused on the drums and the bass. And they would call that the dub version. And that's what this is. Basically, they took the majority of the tracks from Soundclash and they did dub versions of them. And there are a couple of new songs on here as well. By the way, this Super Saver series, that was something that Elektra did in the US back in the day. I still have the shrink wrap on this, as you can see. But back in the day when you went to the record stores, you'd find the Super Saver series. It's basically like records they were trying to get out of their collection and sell for cheap. I think I probably bought this for $3 back in the day. Don't know what it's worth now. To me, in my heart, this is worth $100. You know, this is a great album. In some ways better than Soundclash. It's just a different experience. Again, it's more club oriented, more techno, more house, some great stuff on this. In fact, Trans World Siren, the song, one of the songs on here is amazing. It does have a remix of Blue Eyed Boy. It's called Black Eyed Boy. Some great remixes. There's a remix of Pocket Porn on here. I think it's just called Pocket Dub or Porn Dub. In fact, let's look. What is it? Porn Dub. It also yielded some singles of its own, like Thunder and Women Respond to Bass, which actually I have those singles here. Here's in dub. If you get Soundclash, you need to have this. This is a great album in itself. It's double vinyl too. There's a good, I don't know, probably hours worth of music. The album, Soundclash, is about 40 minutes. This is an hour. So the songs have some more space to breathe. It's spaced over 2 records. So that's especially noteworthy if you're a DJ and you want to spin some records and have the groove have the needle dig into the grooves and really find the bass and the warmth of the pressing. You'll want to get that. This is one of the singles. The hole was always off center here. I don't know how that happened, but actually, you know, this might be fun. I'll pull this one out, actually. This is Women Respond to Bass. This is one of the singles they put out from the album at the RSW label to look like I'm assuming they wanted it to look like the Beamer BMW label. And then something you got with Renegade Soundwave back in the days, you got these little mailers. And, you know, I thought about this. You could buy shirts and records, and I used to have a shirt of this. I'm not convinced I still don't have it. It's somewhere. I have a bunch of old band shirts, but I used to wear that thing with pride, man. I'd go out. People would think it was BMW, but I'd be like, no, it's RSW. I thought I was so cool. Meanwhile, people just thought I was a dork, but I didn't care. I wore it with pride, baby. And then here's their other single. As you can see, this was in a section of my storage unit that saw some water damage. The record's fine, but the jacket took a hit. This is Thunder, one of the in-dub singles. This is the US edition. Yeah, it's just got some remixes of Thunder. Thunder was actually kind of a house mix of Biting My Nails. It's got that groove, that do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Wait, no, is that Cocaine Sex? Is it? No, I think it's a remix of Biting My Nails. I'm losing it right now. I'll remember this later. You would hope I'd remember it for the purposes of this video, but hey, that's not happening right now. Anyway, it's a remix, I think, of like a house mix of Biting My Nails, which is more of a down tempo track. Worth getting. But as I wrap up this video and I stack up all these records, this is the key. This is what you want. Soundclash, okay? Treat yourself to an album that I don't think many people have heard. To my knowledge, it's never been repressed. Renegade Soundwave is one of those groups too that just doesn't, I don't know that a lot of people know of them. I have friends who know a lot about electronic music and haven't been, they're not versed in the Renegade Soundwave tradition. They've never heard them. And they did have a modicum of success in America in the late 80s. Soundclash did get played on MTV a little bit. It did get promoted a bit. But I'm finding as time goes on, not a lot of people know of these guys. And I think that's a real shame because they only put out 2 albums. They did do an album after this, How You Doing, which is great as well. I will probably do a video on that at some point. But this Soundclash record needs to be heard. I really think that, especially if you're into big beat, it's interesting. I think a lot of people in their 40s, like myself, were kind of going back to our time when we were listening to that music and having this renaissance. And Renaissance revisiting these records. I think it happens to every generation. You get to a certain age where you want to go back and listen to stuff and have it affect you again. But the really cool part is, you know, people in their teens and 20s and 30s, like Gen Ys and millennials, are hearing this stuff too. This is the first time they've ever heard it, and they're really enjoying it. So if you're in that age group, if you're in that 15 to 40 age group, say, check this out, man, and try to like think about the music that really moves you now, that's new, and transfer that energy and positivity to Soundclash, and consider that came out in the late 80s. There was nothing that sounded like it. So if there's an album out there that you love now and you know nothing else sounds like it, picture that back in the late 80s with Soundclash. That's what it sounded like. It was new, it was fresh, it was exciting. And it's not very often that you hear an album from the 80s, especially, where everybody was transfixed with, like, you know, electronic drums and these weird, corny, cheesy production methods where people were getting into electronics, but they didn't understand the equipment they were using. And it sounds super dated now. Renegade Soundwave did. They were into technology and they understood how to mix that technology with like traditional rock methods. That's why Gary Asquith, that's why he's such a special part of this band. He brought kind of a rock element to it. He brought almost like a glam aspect to it. His lyrics were funny. They were original. Again, he sang about sex and murder and robbery and things that inspired him. And that kind of stuff, you know, you don't hear that stuff. You know, all you hear is love, about love and cornball stuff. He sang about things that people weren't singing about. So you take that and you mix it with the idea that they were understanding their electronics and making this really cutting edge music, and you get this really special band, Renegade Soundwave, Soundclash. Check it out. I'm going to shut up now. I think it's well worth everyone's time to go seek that album out. And until next time, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll talk to you later.